Welcome back. Moving straight on from where we left off in the last video, we're going to look at other ways of getting back our critical path. Now, generally, critical path is defined by tasks with 0 slack. However, we do have a control in the options dialog that can help with this. If we go into File, Options, and the Advanced tab, and then scroll to the bottom here, we see this. Tasks are critical if slack is less than or equal to 0 days. Now, knowing this kind of thing happens, you do have a little bit of control, but you're limited as to how much you can do. If I make this, and I would usually at a maximum make this generally 5 days, possibly 6, because on the basis that anything that's got less than 5 days, you could argue they're virtually critical anyway, because one slip a couple of days can cause a major problem. So if I make this 5 days, you'll see immediately now this one now becomes critical, because this was sitting at 4.5 days of slack and now it's showing critical. But the issue is that this next task leading into that is 13 days. Now, I can go to 13 days, but the further up I go, the slack gets more and more and more because of all of these resource gaps. So it's a waste of time to me trying to pick all of this up and get a meaningful critical path. The best I can really say is anything that's less than 5 days will treat as critical. And if I filter again for critical path, we'll probably get a little bit further. So now I'm into cladding of lot 2. So we do have a bit more, but again, you see, where was I? 159? No, all I've gained is 1 day, because we were at 160 before. So the critical path is never going to get any better unless you start knitting in the relationships between the trades that are causing the issues. So things like painters, where they're causing big pushouts, the cladding that's causing big pushouts. The only way you can try now to get any kind of a realistic critical path is to start bringing in the resources as part of your predecessors and successors. And it's not ideal, but if we sort of explore the way it works, we know that we've got painters and cladding as major contributors to the problem. So let's look at program for the cladding and see where the cladding teams basically fall. Sorry, at the moment I'm still reviewing critical, so no filters. And so now I've got no filter on, so we've now got the whole program, and I'll go back into the cladding teams because they were a major, and look at how the cladding. So here was the baseline cladding, and you see what we've got now. The best thing I can do is to tie these together, so you can see I've got cladding there, cladding on lot 3, cladding lot 2. So let's just change the details view here. I just need to go into view and change this from resource sheet to basically the task form, and I'm going to change it to predecessors and successors. This just allows us to look at this now. So we've got 43 as a predecessor to 159. So in here I'm now going to put 43, and by the same token, sorry, I'm making a mistake there, it's not on this one, it's on this one, because the way we're going to link it is 43 down to 275 and then 275 into 159. So 275, so this is now 43, or it would be if I could type 43, click OK, and you see now I've created a link between those, saying that basically, and the reason I'm doing this is to tie the chain of work together, because obviously this is a critical task and this is being fed by that, so we can make the argument that this is the actual critical path chain of work. So the predecessor was 43 and the successor now is 159. So I type in 159 and link the two together, and you can see now this is now becoming critical path. If I press F3 to remove all filters, and I'll filter for critical path again, just to see what the critical path is shown as now. Now, because of the way we've tied the critical path together, this now has made things a lot more cohesive. Now, don't forget, I'm still basically carrying a 5-day notice on my advanced tab that says anything less than 5 days, because if you notice these now, although I've tied this chain together, it's all showing maximum of 5 days slack. So if I, just to get a better view of what's going on, if I go into a print preview, let's have a look. I'll make it over 3 pages, say, just so that it maybe makes it a little bit easier to read. No, it's not going to work because in the daily view I'm already 9 pages maximum tall. Adding an extra page isn't going to make any difference to this. It's probably better I change to a weekly view or a monthly view. If I change to a monthly view, it may well be a bit clearer. And let's filter for critical into a print preview. We'll change it to 2 pages just so we get a bit, or maybe 1 page. Change it to 1 page just so we get an overview very quickly. There. So it looks now like we have a pretty cohesive critical path. But you notice, because this is one thing, a critical path, when I show critical path, the black is the baseline, which shows where it was when we originally started. I'm going to turn that off because it's just confusing things a little bit here at the moment. So in the format tab, baseline, take that out. But I'm also going to add the link lines so we can trace the critical path through, because very often in programs, things like this now, you see we've got this outlier in the critical path saying critical path comes down here, and then it seems to be totally unconnected. This is generally the only time I would show the link lines on a program, is to show how the critical path is tied together. So you can see in this chain of work comes down, it leads into this, it leads back into that, which then leads down through there. So it shows that that is a coherent critical path. So what we've done there isn't perfect, but it does show a critical path and give you an argument point if things change or events happen that change the critical path. You always have to prove the effect on critical path as to why you're due an extension of time because of events, etc. So you have to start with a critical path, and you have to be able to knit any delay events into it so that you can illustrate the effect. And this is why we go to so much trouble to make sure that A, the durations are correct and that we've got enough detail in the program, because essentially if somebody has to do a job on site, then that job should be in the program, because any chain of work can suffer a delay. And whilst, as I said before, 90% of the work is not on critical path, 90% has an amount of slack. The slack can be anything from a day or 2 days of slack, or it could be 100 days of slack. Every event that happens and delays some part of the work is chewing into that slack. So at the start of a job, you may have a delay on a task that's got 20 days of slack, and if it gets delayed for 10 days, all you do is chew up 10 days of slack. You don't affect the critical path at that point. But you have to remember that every task downstream of that has had its slack reduced. And as things happen, the closer you get to the end of the job, the amount of slack available becomes less and less, and things have a knock-on effect. So an event that happens at the start of the job may have a direct impact on a delay 4 months later, which pushes something into critical, because it's chewed up all of the slack and the event has pushed in and added days to your finish date. In order to be sure of winning your arguments for an extension of time, you have to be able to illustrate all of that. So never underestimate the effect that even things that seem totally unconnected to critical path have. Even things where you haven't got somebody to do the job available for a week, that has an effect. And as you've seen in this, it can affect your ability to show the critical path. And therefore, if you have an argument with a client over the dispute over a payment for a variation and the time it's taken, you can be shooting yourself in the foot if you don't take the time to put in the resources, because the resources are the number one risk to your program running out. Because as you've seen in this, we started off with the baseline program saying we could finish this job by the 3rd of November, but when we program it for reality with the resources we have available, we've actually got 16 days. We've got three weeks, 1.5 days additional time, which if you'd programmed it and said, oh, we can do the job by the 3rd of November, could mean that you are looking at on 3 houses being 3 weeks late at $1,750 a week per house. Then 1751, 5,200 a week for 3 weeks is $17,000 penalties and 3 weeks of P&G costs, prelim and general, that you're not going to get paid. And if your running cost of the site is, say, on a job like this, say $2,000 a day, well, there's another 30 grand. You know, it's important that you resource the program, that you get your durations right, and you give yourself something to argue from when things go wrong, because things always go wrong. All right, I hope you found that useful. I know it's a deep subject and I know it can be quite confusing, but it's a case of jumping into it, having a go, and just getting used to doing it. And it's just practice, 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 practice. Now we've taken the trouble to work out what our backstop position is and what our likely finish date is based on the resources we can get. So what we're showing now as our critical path is a very, very robust program that we can rely on for durations because we know it's resourced properly. We've got a lot of detail in that shows that we've thought of everything and covered everything. And I mentioned before about the backstop position. The backstop position is the shortest time we could possibly do the job in. And the reason we work that out is so that our contract negotiation, it becomes much stronger. Because whilst we're saying that this is how long it's going to take us to do the job, this overall completion of the 25th of the 11th, we know that if we had the resources available, we could do it 3 weeks shorter. Now, this is, bear in mind, just a very small development of 3 houses. It could be 30 houses, and this difference between the backstop, shortest possible time, and where we're actually saying with true to life resources, this difference could be 3 or 4 months. Now, one of the problems with contractors going into tender very often is that the tender program is very short on detail. It's generally unresourced, so they don't really know exactly how long it's going to take. It's based on a number of broad guesses and assumptions and sweeping statements. And let's take an example where you're going into a contract negotiation with a tender program that says it's going to be 15 months. You don't know where your backstop actually is. You don't know what the shortest possible time you could actually do it, which might say be 13 months. And your tender program, had it been worked out to a fully comprehensive state and made very robust with realistic resources, might actually be 18 months to do. So at the point of going in and submitting a tender and then going into contract negotiation, the contractor is very often in a position where they did a job last year that was something similar. It was about 15 months, so we'll go with 15 months. The first thing the client's going to say is, I want it done in 12. Now, very often, the client, the contractor, because he doesn't know any better, will agree to the 12 months because it's a bit tight, but yeah, okay, we want to get the work. The problem is if you don't know where your backstop position is, And as I say, if say your backstop position is actually 13 months, you're committing to a job that you couldn't possibly, even under ideal circumstances, meet. And you're putting yourself at massive risk of penalties. Now, on the other hand, if you knew going in that your backstop position was 13 months, how is that going to change your negotiation? For me, I'd be saying, right, you want it done in 12 months. We can't do it in 12 months. The fastest we could ever possibly do it would be 13 months. But in order to meet that, we'd have to be bringing in people from out of town. We'd have to be putting them up in hotels. We'd have to be feeding them. We'd have to be paying them more, because it's going to need a lot more resources than what we know we can get in town. So the choice for the client is purely and simply, look, we can do 13 months, but it's going to cost a lot more money. It's acceleration costs because of all of these extra overheads we're going to have to do. So it's your choice. You could potentially, or we could potentially, say, trim out a month out of our 15 months and we'll call it 14 months and we'll do that for the same price. But if you want to get it down to 12, that's not going to happen. The best you'll ever get is 13, but it's going to have acceleration costs. So you can pay whatever the acceleration cost comes to, say 10, 15% more, maybe as much as 20% more, if you really must have it in that shortest possible time. But this is where we stand. You see the difference. Your negotiation becomes much, much stronger and harder, because there's no way you're going to knowingly, unless you're making some kind of a commercial decision on it, you're never knowingly going to sell yourself short and put yourself at massive risk of penalties. Because a typical commercial job may well have a $10,000 a day P&G cost just to run the site. If you're trimming 3 months out, you're potentially cutting your income down by 600,000 by agreeing to 12 months. If you can't make the 12 months and you end up taking 15 months, you've got 3 months of penalties, and penalties might be double your P&G. So you could be looking at $20,000 a day in penalty rates. So making sure that you've got time to finish the job is extremely important, because the cost of overrun by 1 day is very often massive. If you said $10,000 a day in P&G and $20,000 a day in penalties, that's $30,000 a day. 5 days a week is $150,000 a week potential cost of running late. So the reason you work all of this out is so that you are informed and you can make decisions and commercial decisions in terms of your negotiation to make sure you don't sell yourself short and put yourself at massive financial risk. Plus the fact, because you've made a very detailed and fully thought out program, there is always time to do and meet the program, because you've got everything in there. Your program is very, very robust, and if it's in the program, you know you've got time to do it. Okay, hope you found that useful. If there's any questions you have that come out of this, then basically send us an email, flick us an email on JustAsk at Menlo Academy, and we'll come back to you and see how we can help. But the whole point of this is that we're here to help you and give you support.